Welcome back. Democracy and good governance have become buzzwords of sorts in political discourse today, especially in this country. I spoke with longtime activist and lawyer Nimalka Fernando about what these issues really mean in Sri Lanka's current context. The recent end to the war and the spate of provincial council elections that have been happening this year have been seen or could be seen as attempts to restore a democracy that was seen as sorely lacking during the years of conflict. Now, 5 months after the war, what is your assessment of democracy and good governance prevailing in the country?
Just holding elections, it's not a symbol for democracy. Election and democracy is part and parcel of governance. But if there is no free and fair election, then it's not helping in the democracy. So I do not think that having 10 elections during a period of 10 months is saying that we have democracy and we have a flourishing democracy.
But have things improved after the war?
Your first question had several buzzwords: election, war, after the war. Now, if you look at the democracy and good governance issue of Sri Lanka, while it is so connected to war, it is also not related to the war. It is related to the constitution of Sri Lanka and its implementation, and how each government or the executive have used the provisions of the constitution with war or without war. So, at times the constitutional provisions were used to justify the power concentration that was necessary to execute the war. But we have been very critical of the constitutional provision and the manner in which the executive president was using the powers to undermine democracy. And this is why we were continuously campaigning for the implementation of the 17th Amendment, which reduced the immense power the executive has in relation to managing affairs of the state, including elections. So, if you look at the democracy and governance issue of Sri Lanka, you have to look at the systemic aspect as well as the war which militarized our state. So, in a situation like that, when we are talking about democracy and governance, I would like to say that the performance is pathetic, more than pathetic. It has created fear, it has brought in silencing the journalist, the whole issue of right to life and freedom of expression.
Now, you have been a civil society activist for many years. How is civil society addressing these issues?
From 1977 onwards, if I retrace back my activism as a civil society activist, we have been calling for abolishing of the executive presidency, mainly because we know that it threatened democracy. Since then, we have been campaigning for the improvement of human rights situation in this country, 89, 94. Then now, since the last 2 years, since the war escalated, the issues related to human rights, violation of fundamental freedoms, good governance, increase in corruption, these are some of the issues that the civil society activists have had to deal with. What do? We want change. We want to reform the thinking. We want to influence the manner in which people are thinking about governance, democracy, human rights.
So, do you see any environment in the near future or even the distant future where the government will react as you say that it should?
Not the government, not this government, unfortunately. We need to realign forces. We need to create a new political force in this country. The purpose and the objective of the Platform for Freedom is to bring this discussion, this conversation back to our society. For 60 years, if we have thought changing governments, changing one party, bring another party back into power, could achieve transformation and give the necessary welfare, sense of dignity to the people, that has failed. That kind of traditional way of doing politics must end. So, we want to create a more conscious citizenry, a more conscious political force who will respond to principles, basic principles.
But how can you make sure that this is achieved? How can it be achieved?
We have to make the parliament and politics more accountable to the people. We need to abolish the executive presidency. For instance, you have an executive presidency, you have a parliamentary system. Parliamentary system is more accountable to the people. We've gone and superimposed an executive presidency into the parliamentary system, which is accountable. So, we've stifled the parliament. So, we need to first, I think, for the future of Sri Lanka, the first thing we should do is to abolish the executive presidency.
Okay. Well, there are elections coming up in the coming months. Do you see a stage being set for an equitable political solution?
I don't see that. Partly because when the state has relied so heavily on a military option, it is very difficult to expect such a state to deliver a political solution. But I hope we will have sense to deliver a political solution, because without a political solution we will continuously face tensions, and it will be very discriminatory towards the minority community, mainly the Tamils and the Muslims in this country.
So, in the end, to end with, what would you like to see in the immediate future in terms of a positive change in democracy and governance?
For people to begin to think that this country belongs to them, the Tamil people, Sinhala and the Muslim people to be united to create a new governance in Sri Lanka. It's time we end this dependency on India, China, Pakistan, and think that the international community will help us. The homegrown solution is in our hands. If you are talking about a homegrown solution, there needs to be a total transformation in political thinking, and technically how can we initiate it, abolish the executive presidency, go back to the parliamentary system, and then we begin to elect, change the electoral system, and let's have a viable democracy that is responsible for the people. Power sharing to the north and east, where we begin to equally begin to share the natural wealth of this country.